episode of City Connection. I'm your host, Allison Donahue. In this show, we give the residents of Grand Rapids the opportunity to hear directly and speak directly, in some cases, to our mayor, Mayor Rosalind Bliss. Thank you so much for being on our show today. Later this episode, you'll be able to hear from the executive director from the Grand Rapids Housing Commission, and we will be able to ask questions directly later on during this episode. But before we get there, we have time to talk, just the two of us. So Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
It's been a busy month, so we have no shortage of topics. July 1, today, marks the new fiscal budget for both the city of Grand Rapids and the state, and I know that there's some money in the state's budget that's set aside for Grand Rapids. The City Commission recently adopted a $690 million budget for this fiscal year that we just entered. Yeah. So what are some of the key points and investments in that budget, and then what are some things you're looking forward to that are coming out of the state budget?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did, City Commission finalized our budget at the end of May. So under our charter, we have to have it approved 30 days before implementation, which is July 1, as you indicated. So today starts a new fiscal year. What you will find is we had a lot of services that continued in most of our key departments, but then we also put a focus on continuing to support or expand priorities of ours. So we did add additional funds to beef up our victim services within our police department. We're still supporting our mental health co-response team, which we got $250,000 from the state of Michigan to help support that program and grow that program. That's where we have a clinician or social worker that goes out with a police officer when a call comes in, and the indication from the call is that the individual really needs somebody to help with a behavioral health or a mental health challenge or crisis or struggle that they're having. So that is still being funded. Continue to fund some of our violence prevention efforts. And then we are continuing to look at our investments in large-scale projects. So last month we were at the groundbreaking for MLK Park Lodge, a significant project there in the 3rd Ward that we kicked off. In our budget, we're also supporting building 2 new fire stations in the 3rd Ward. So those will start moving forward this year as well. And so you look at, our budget is a little confusing. We have enterprise funds, which pay for like water, sewer, parking. We have our general fund, which largely pays for fire, police, parks. And then we have our capital budget. So you'll find significant investments in all 3 of those kind of pockets of money. So hopefully people will be happy with the enhanced community services that we're working to provide. And then the state came in last week, the state finalized their state budget. And a couple things I was really excited about is that we received a $5 million allocation for Roosevelt Park Lodge. So that's another lodge in a key park over on like the southeast side of our city that we've been wanting to redevelop for a long time. So we got some state funds to help support that redevelopment. And then we also got we had an allocation for $3 million for solar at our Butterworth landfill. And I know we've talked about that project before. It's been a priority of mine for quite some time. And that funding will help us build the infrastructure that will enable us to add solar that can then be used in our primary circuit. So City of Grand Rapids, we have our own primary circuit, and that's the power that goes to light up our street lights and some of the other city and county facilities. So we'll be able to generate energy to support the primary circuit, which will directly create and allow us to use renewable energy for those services.
So when local funding ends up in the state budget, are those our local, state, House, and Senate representatives?
Yes.
Fighting for that at the Capitol?
Yes. So quite frankly, if it wasn't for our state reps who represent West Michigan or our senator, many of those allocations wouldn't exist. So those were some of the specific requests from the City of Grand Rapids. But then there were a number of other projects that were supported. So $360,000 was allocated to support a permanent supportive housing project here in the city. 1.5 million was allocated to support a low-income housing project here in our city. So there were a host of other allocations to support either nonprofits or projects right here in Grand Rapids.
Great.
Yeah.
So another thing that folks might be expecting to see in the next couple of days are absentee ballots. If
Yeah.
they are expecting that in their mailbox, they might sing that in the next few days. Can you talk to us about what folks in Grand Rapids might be voting on before this August 6th primary next month?
Yeah,
What
so
they might see on these ballots?
yeah, I'm glad you asked me that. So absentee ballots started going out last week. So if you are on the permanent absentee list or you've requested an absentee ballot, those will be in your mailbox either today or in the next couple days, and you can start voting. So a number of changes happen at the state level. So absentee ballots are one. We will have drop boxes available again. I know outside libraries, we have them, even right here. You'll be able to go down to our clerk's office 9 days before the election, which is Tuesday, August 6th, and cast a vote there if you wish. So there's lots of different ways to vote. You can get all the information on how to vote, where to vote, what precinct you're in from our city clerk. And we do have a number of things on the August ballot. So we have competitive primaries at the state level. So we have a competitive primary for the U.S. Senate seat, both the Republican and Democratic primary, and that is to replace U.S. Senator Stabenow. And then we have a number of primaries at the state level for state reps. Some of our county reps have primaries right here in our city. So those are our county commissioners who are running. And then for the city of Grand Rapids, we have a competitive primary in the 1st Ward and the 3rd Ward for a city commission seat, and a primary for the mayor. So I keep reminding people, I'm not running again because I can't. I am term limited out. There was a change to our charter about 10 years ago, and so I'm not able to run again, even though people have asked me why I'm not running. We do have term limits, so there is a competitive primary for the mayor's race. The top 2 vote getters of all 3 of those elections will go on to the November general election. Then we have, in the city of Grand Rapids, we have 2 ballot measures. One is a millage renewal for early childhood. And so that's a countywide millage that was passed a couple of years ago. It's up for renewal. And then we also have a request called Destination Kent, countywide ask to increase our lodging tax. So this is people who stay at a hotel or a motel. The request is to go from a 5% to an 8% lodging tax. It's about $3 a night for any given person, or any given room, I should say. And then those dollars, similar to the current lodging tax, are able to be used to maintain our convention center, expand the convention center, support venues or assets, community-owned assets, like the amphitheater, soccer stadium. One question I've received from folks that I keep reminding them is that all of these facilities are publicly owned. Yes, we have private sports play in those, in like the Van Andel Arena, right? We have the Griffins, we have the Gold, we have the Grand Rapids Rise volleyball. They play at the Van Andel, but the Van Andel is owned by the Convention Arena Authority, which is a public authority that has individuals on it that represent the state of Michigan, the county, the city, and Experience Grand Rapids, which is our CVB or Visitors Bureau.
And our Grand Rapids documentaries actually just started covering that
Oh,
body
good.
too. So if people are looking to learn more about the folks that look over our big
Yeah.
arenas in Grand Rapids, like the DeVos Center downtown too, there's a place for them with Grand Rapids documentaries.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So that whole election is coming up. We have about a month
Yeah.
until that first primary election. Where do you recommend folks go to learn more about it before they go to vote?
Yeah, so if you just want to see what's on the ballot, you can find that at the state of Michigan. And so the Secretary of State, if you want to go, you put in where you live and you can pull up your ballot. So you can do that at the city of Grand Rapids as well. For any candidates that are on the ballot, most candidates nowadays, they have a website, they have a Facebook, so you can find information about them on social media. As you said, there's lots of media outlets that are doing Q&As, so you can find out information there. I know Destination Kent and the Early Childhood Millage, they both have websites with FAQs. So if you have any questions about those, you can find that easily online. I would say that's probably the best, although you're starting to see more media coverage, and then obviously the campaigns will be sending out information.
Perfect. Switching a little bit, last month in June, middle of June, we had another large water main break in Grand Rapids. This one impacted less people, but the flooding was more significant this time around. Can you talk to us a little bit about what this means for the aging water infrastructure in Grand Rapids, and if city officials might be rethinking the timeline for replacing some of those?
Yeah, it's so difficult. So first off, we have a really good asset management plan. We review, and we are always monitoring the quality of our underground infrastructure. We've invested hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 30 years to separate our sewer system. So a lot of our underground infrastructure is actually newer than many other older cities. But the reality is that we're still a city that's over 100 years old, and we still do have some older pipes as part of our infrastructure. So water main breaks are not completely unusual. So the water main break that happened in the spring, it was actually a relatively newer line, and it was a connecting point that ended up failing. And so not all water main breaks are because of the age of the pipe. Sometimes it's a replacement that failed, or it's a connector that failed. So we always do a deep dive. We look at what happened, why it happened. We try to prevent it. But we'll continue to do that. Of course, we're always concerned when we have a water main break, especially of this magnitude. Like you said, it was a smaller area impacted, but those impacted were really significantly impacted. And we're continuing to work on, figuring that out, and not just getting the pipe replaced and fixed, but then also doing restoration. So I would say if you have any concerns, if you see any red flags, if you have concerns with your water pressure, like the sooner that we're notified about a potential issue, the better. So we just continue to ask residents, let us know if you have concerns about water, coloration, smell, pressure, anything. Let us know so that we can get out there and take a look.
And I do know the city has a plan in place already to replace some of these water mains.
Yeah.
So we will see some of this work continue to happen.
You'll see a lot of the work continue to happen. I think the challenges, and I've talked about this with our plan to replace lead lines. One, it's expensive. So every year we only have so much money that we allocate. But the reality is you can only do so much work in a given year anyway. Especially in Michigan. So construction cycle, but also like availability of contractors, the availability of making sure that we have the engineers that can make sure that they're doing the designs. And there's a lot of work that goes into infrastructure projects, which can be frustrating for folks because at the city, very often we are talking about infrastructure projects a good 18 months before they actually come to fruition. And this is true across the city. Do I wish they could move more quickly? Absolutely. But there's only so much we can do so quickly, especially with our limited construction cycle.
Switching again, new topic, changes to residential recycling.
Yeah.
I just learned on the city's website that there's going to be a 6-month pilot, and I'm sure you can better describe this, but it's a little bit more high-tech of a way to find out if people are recycling in a way that works, in a way that doesn't have contaminated materials in there or plastics that shouldn't be recycled. Tell us a little bit more about that program.
Yeah, so this is a pilot, but let me give you a little backstory. So City of Grand Rapids, we have one of the highest recycling rates in the state of Michigan, which we're actually very proud of, largely because we give out our recycling bins at no cost to the resident. So you pay for it every time your refuse is tipped, but not your recycling. So we have a really good program. It's been in place for a long time. But over the years, we have peaks and valleys of contaminated recycling. And once we get 1 or 2 contaminated drops into the truck, it can contaminate the entire truck, which means none of those materials that we really want to be recycled can be recycled. And we're just taking that product now over to the waste to energy site. So over the last couple of years, we've partnered with some community partners like WEMIAC, so the West Michigan Environmental Action Council, and we have teamed up with individuals going out into neighborhoods and physically looking into recycle bins and then tagging the bin and the homeowner if there is contamination or something that's in the bin that cannot be recycled. So it's very, takes a lot of time and people and hours. So since then, but we were able to hone in and reduce the contamination. So we've been looking at what else is available to us to try to reduce contamination and increase the amount of recycling. And so this new pilot is based on new technology that uses imagery and, quite frankly, AI to scan what is being dumped and to flag if something is contaminated or if something is in the recycle bin that shouldn't be. So we're going to try it. We're going to see what kind of response we get. And honestly, our goal is education. We want to educate homeowners. Like, we really want you to recycle, but we really want you to be able to recycle. We want your recycle bin to not be contaminated, which is a win-win for everyone.
So I know with recycling, people can kind of either feel a little defensive or it's confusing for folks. Can we break down the word contaminated a little bit? Because I know that can mean a few different things.
Yeah. Contamination could be a whole host of things. One, it could be trash that is, it could be trash with food on it, or just a product that can't be recycled. It could be, I mean, honestly, I've seen the reports from when we have done tracking. I used to be on the waste management committee at the county level, so I learned lots about waste. But sometimes people, accidentally, or they don't realize, they can't throw in baby diapers. They can't throw in dirty materials. There's only certain plastics that can be recycled. There's only certain types of glass that can be recycled. So sometimes it's a product, the actual container, but sometimes it's trash that is thrown into a recycle bin that just can't be recycled. It's certain types of styrofoams that can't be recycled. Plastic bags, we no longer allow plastic bags. They actually, because we have a single stream facility, everything gets dumped and then it goes, have you been to the recycling facility? Oh, you should go on a tour. Yeah. They're really informative and educational. But the plastic bags, because things are cycled through with air and different magnets and things like that, the plastic bags can get caught up and actually cause the machines to jam. So for plastic bags, we encourage you to take them back to the store. So Meijer has big bins that you can take your plastic bags to, put them in. Ultimately, we hope you stop using plastic bags and you take a reusable bag in with you when you grocery shop, or use paper bags, which are recyclable. So some of that is just education, right? And it'll start flagging some of that. When it's flagged, we'll educate the homeowner. We'll work with them. Of course, we want them to continue to recycle.
Great. I have a ton of more questions, mostly surrounded about or around the topic of housing, but we have an expert here.
Yes,
so
we do.
I'm not too concerned that they won't be covered. But now it's time for our first break. So when we return, Mayor Bliss will talk with Lindsay Reams, the Executive Director of the GR Housing Commission. Stay tuned.
Awesome. Perfect. today the executive director, and that's your title, executive director, and president, or just executive director? Executive director of our Grand Rapids Housing Commission, Lindsay Reams. So Lindsay's been with the Housing Commission, has it been 3 years now?
3.5 now.
3.5 years. So 3.5 years, but she's worked in the housing space for a long time. So what I'd like to do is talk to her about her experience, her perspective, talk to her a little bit more about what the Housing Commission does. I have found in my work that a lot of people, they're not really familiar with all the great work happening in our Housing Commission. They're kind of these quiet leaders in the housing space in our city, but they do their work relatively quietly. So we'll talk about that. Lindsay's been really active on a whole host of community initiatives that we've been doing lately, so hopefully we'll have time to get to that. If not, we'll talk about that in our next segment. So let's just start with you. You've been in the housing space. We have worked with HUD before being our Housing Commission CEO. And so why don't we just start a little bit about you, where you're from, what's your history, what brought you to Grand Rapids?
So I was actually raised in the military, so didn't move around too much, but came to Michigan as a duty station, last duty station of my dad in the Air Force up north. So been in Michigan for almost 40 years now, but came to Grand Rapids to finish my 4-year degree, and about that same time started working at HUD. So I worked at the Department of Housing and Urban Development for 31 years, and worked in all spaces at the department, from public housing, multifamily housing, fair housing, and then decided that I'm in the sandwich generation, so I have aging parents who needed more of my time and attention, and just decided that it was time to come back home and do some work locally. So.
Yeah, so you applied for the leadership position at our Housing Commission and was selected. I'm so glad you were. And so tell us a little bit, and I know HUD, so the Housing Commission still works really closely with HUD, obviously, and MSHDA. And sometimes that can be confusing to folks. So maybe let's first start, and if you can give an overview to folks who aren't familiar with the Grand Rapids Housing Commission, talk about the scope and the work of the commission, and then how you work in partnership with MSHDA and HUD to do the work that you do.
So the Grand Rapids Housing Commission has a myriad of housing programs. Some programs that provide subsidies attached to a unit, and then another number of units where the subsidies attach to the individual. So their subsidy gets to move with them, which is what we call the Housing Choice Voucher Program. They get to choose what type of housing and what community works best for them. So we have about 4,400 units of subsidy that we administer. We actually are sort of the intermediary for most of the programs with the subsidy that comes to us from HUD. We partner with a lot of private entities, including mom and pop landlords, big landlords, and then a lot of our other housing, affordable housing providers, where we actually provide some subsidized units in their developments, which a lot of people don't know. And so, but we also want to make sure that it's not just about affordable housing for our families. We really have strong feelings about addressing vitality of families holistically. So we have tons of supportive service programs that and self-sufficiency programs that we also administer for our families, savings programs, escrow deposits, homeownership programs. A lot of programs we work with other partners to make sure that our seniors are able to live independently as long as they can. And so we work with HUD as the intermediary between the funding and the actual affordable housing providers. And then we partner with MSHDA on a lot of stuff, but MSHDA also has their own programs very similar to the ones that we administer, but we work really closely with them, not just from a housing voucher perspective, but also from tons of other things, tax credit programs. So MSHDA is a great partner for us.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think some people don't realize, so you have some housing commission, housing developments. So Leonard Terrace, people probably drive.
About 1,000 units we
Yeah.
own and manage, yeah.
And some of those units, some of those developments, well, first off, they're all for individuals who qualify. So I want to talk about that. Some of them, though, I've toured a number of, some of them really target more like seniors, people who have some type of disability or need more supports, and then you provide them, often right there at the facility, you help them. So for folks who aren't familiar and they're hearing this for the first time, and they don't understand what a voucher is. You said, so obviously, some of the vouchers, you move into Leonard Terrace, that voucher is with that unit. But as you said, you also can have one attached to you, and then you can move around based on a facility or a rental property that accepts that voucher. So for people who are like, what is a voucher? And if I qualify, how do I get one? Or at least get on the list. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so I'll start with just by saying nationally, 1 in 4 families who's eligible for housing subsidy or a voucher actually receives the subsidy just because there's not enough. And we know that affordable housing is a crisis in many communities nationally right now. But we maintain waiting lists for all of the properties that we own and manage. And so those applications are open and folks can go on our website and actually submit applications. There are criteria around, some of them only households who are seniors, 55 or older. Some, target and focus on families. Others are work with special populations. So we have a rapid rehousing program that also works with homeless families. We have some units that are dedicated in our developments for permanent supportive housing. And so we're lucky in that we get to, some people might not say it's luck, but that we get to work with a variety of programs and really serve a number of different populations who need that assistance. The housing choice voucher, and so all of those properties, that is correct, right? The subsidy attaches to the unit. So as someone moves out, the next person moves in, and then they get to take advantage of the subsidy. Families generally pay 30% of their adjusted gross income towards their portion of the rent, and then the rest is picked up with the subsidy. For a housing choice voucher, many people know this as Section 8. Section 8 is actually the section of the statute, Section 8, Section 9. Section 8 is actually the section of the statute that talks about this type of housing. It's since been renamed housing choice vouchers to more appropriately reflect what they are. So it attaches to the family or the individual, and today they may be a 3-person household who wants to live in a duplex unit. And they find a duplex unit for rent and a landlord that's willing to participate in the program, which is really critical. We've worked really hard the last few years to encourage more landlords to participate in the program. And but next year, maybe they have twins, and now they're suddenly a 5-member household, and they really want to move to a unit that is a single-family home for rent. And so that allows them to make those decisions. Typically, from a federal perspective, there are 3 main criteria. One is that you're income eligible, and so that's 80%. For most of our programs, that's 80% or below of area median income, which is $100,000. And then there are a couple criteria that the federal government requires us to check for. One is that you're not on a registered sex offender list, and then the second is that you've not been convicted of manufactured of methamphetamines on in a subsidized property. So those really are the main criteria to get past the federal requirements, and then there are some requirements that are site specific, right? Whether you have to be a certain age or, we have veterans preference, we have city residency preferences for the properties that we own and manage.
Yeah. Well, that is, great summary, so thank you for that. We're about out of time for this section, so I'll just end by saying, before we take a break, we'll come back and talk more about this. Vouchers for a long time have been really critical in helping get people safe and stable housing. And, for years, I've been talking about how we need to increase at the federal level the number of vouchers and the support for that program. So we can talk more about that. But thank you so much for all of that good information. We'll take a break now and then come back together for Q&A. Awesome. Nice job.
That goes fast.
I know it does.
It's morning in Grand Rapids. Do you know what's going on in your city? Stay informed about what's happening in your community with The Rapidian, your source for hyperlocal news and information. The Rapidian is a community-focused news source powered by local residents like you. Our volunteer writers and reporters create content that hits close to home about topics like local government, business, schools, events, and people. The Rapidian goes beyond the headlines to provide in-depth coverage of issues that affect Grand Rapids directly, so you can stay in the know. We aim to uplift the community by sharing positive, inspiring stories of growth, progress, and neighborhood pride. The Rapidian is your neighborhood newspaper for the digital age. Follow us on our website and social media to stay connected to your community. This is The Rapidian.
Welcome back to City Connection. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Allison Donahue, and in this segment, Mayor Bliss and Lindsay Reams, the Executive Director of the GR Housing Commission, are joining us to answer questions from the public. And I believe we have a few questions lined up that are housing specific. If there's still time to take part in the conversation, so if you'd like to send in questions, you can send those to cityconnection@grcmc.org. All right, our first question is for you, Lindsay. It's from Melinda. Melinda asks, what are the priorities for the Housing Commission?
Oh, that's a good question. So we have several priorities, but I will also say that we've just launched some strategic planning initiatives for to start to identify some other priorities as we move forward. But we want to house as many families as we can with the funding that we have. We also really strive to be a great partner with our other affordable housing providers. So however we can maximize efficiencies and minimize duplication of efforts, we want to do that. We don't want to be doing the same thing as everyone. And we can really stretch the housing resources if we work more collaboratively together. So we've worked really hard on that the last couple years. We also make sure that we're good stewards of those federal dollars and that we're spending them the way that they're supposed to be spent. And we want to make sure that we're responsive to our program participants. And so we focused a lot on the last couple years, and we'll continue to do so till we get it completely right, and that's improving our customer service.
Great. Another question for you is from Fiora. How are we helping people not just find a place to live, but afford to own their own housing?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit earlier about how we like to approach families holistically. So we also have a home ownership program, and we have an Envision Center that focuses on a number of aspects, financial management, We also have a family self-sufficiency program. And what that program does is allow families to save money as their earned income increases, so does their portion of the rent. They typically pay 30% of their adjusted gross income as their portion. But when they sign up for the FSS program, as they continue to participate in these classes, their income increases, whether they finish school or done some other job training. Their rent still does increase, but we take that portion of the increase and we set it aside for them in an escrow account. And it's a 5-year program. And when they finish the program, and they've met all the requirements, they can get that escrow. And it's a great opportunity for them to use it as a down payment on a house. Our escrows average usually around $10,000 to $12,000, but we've paid out escrows as high as in the 30,000s. So it's a great opportunity. We have a Housing Choice Voucher program, which allows families to use their voucher to subsidize their mortgage payment for a number of years, usually 15 years, depending on if it's an elderly family or a disabled family. So after that 15 years, they have probably escalated to where they don't need subsidy anymore for their mortgage payment, or if they do still, they have quite a bit of equity in the home and they can remortgage, they'll refinance and have a much more affordable payment.
You mentioned these financial literacy type classes. Where can folks who are interested in that find out more?
So they can visit our website. They can also stop by our office. We have a designated Envision Center, and we partner with, I think once or twice a week we do classes, and we rotate among our financial institution partners. We also partner with Michigan State University Extension. Home Repair Services does some courses with us, and of course I mentioned our banking partners.
And do you have to qualify to be able to take those classes?
No, we generally open them to the public. Definitely all of our program participants are eligible, but we like for the Envision Center to serve the community. So we are just really getting that up and running again. It was designated during COVID. And so post-COVID, we're really trying to solidify all of our partners and get some more stuff in there. We've done some Secretary of State mobile van stuff there. We're working closely with the Job Corps to bring some stuff there. We're working with the Grand Rapids School District, Public Schools, to do some GED online stuff there. So we're really excited about what's to come.
Great. Thanks for humoring my follow-up questions. Another question from Yim. Don't we just need to make our current housing denser? We can't grow by expansion, so if people are moving here, the only solution is more high-density housing options. What are your thoughts?
So lots of thoughts. And I would say that's one of many options for addressing housing in the community. There's lots of different things that we need to consider, including zoning ordinances, land, need, right?
Can you help us understand what high density means in this context?
Right, so high density would be a lot more units in a smaller space. So maybe a 10-story high-rise versus, 10 single-family homes in that same space. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of things to think about. I think that we do have to think about that as a strategy as we're thinking about housing in Grand Rapids. And it's not just affordable housing that's needed in Grand Rapids. The growth here has been so significant over the last 10 years that we need housing in every income bracket. And what is happening is because there isn't an adequate supply of housing in an appropriate affordability bracket, people are renting and buying in the next lower level, which has a trickle effect. So those who need the most affordable housing are sort of being squeezed out of the market because a bracket that actually could afford more can't find something in that bracket. So,
Yeah, and I'm going to add a couple things, and I really appreciate that question. The reality is for cities is that there's not one solution. Zoning is one of them. City Commission, we actually made a number of changes to our zoning code just recently in the last 60 days, encouraging and allowing for more accessory dwelling units so people can add a smaller apartment above their garage, and that could be easier. Making smaller lots, buildable lots, creating opportunities for more multi-unit housing by right, making it easier to get approval for that, especially on busier corridors. And then you got to think about like where we want to be a city where whether you want to live in a small apartment or you want to, and you're single, or if you have a family of 5 or 7 and you want a single family home to raise your family in, there's a place for you. And people need different types of housing across their lifespan. You know, we've heard from baby boomers who want to be in a smaller condo or a smaller, so again, it's not, we don't want to be a city that the only thing we have is high density residential. We really need mixed use, mixed types of housing. And then we need to look at where do we have opportunity for significant higher density housing that we can encourage building that there. So what we've done, and this is part of our master planning process as well, downtown, there's no height limit. You can build a 30-story building, 45-story building with lots of housing, which is appropriate. You wouldn't necessarily want that, you know,
In East Town.
Or in Heritage Hill, right? Like, so you want to be a city with lots of different neighborhood types and lots of different housing types. Now, can you fit a 4-unit housing unit in some of those more lower density housing? Probably, and it wouldn't be disruptive. But then we have all this opportunity where you look at Division, where you look at Plainfield and Alpine, corridors that are more transit oriented, where you have lots of vacant spaces, underutilized space, asphalt parking lots. And how do we start to encourage more higher density residential in those corridors? So that's some of the conversation we're having right now, even in the midst of our master plan.
And I know we were talking a little bit off camera earlier too about converting commercial buildings into residential buildings. Are we thinking that we might see more of that as we try to find ways to address the housing crisis here?
I think we will. So a couple things we did. So mixed unit developments, that's where you have commercial or office and residential. And we have lots of examples of that right here on the west side. A couple of years ago, the City Commission allowed for residential on the main floor if the owner of that building couldn't get somebody from commercial or office in that space. So we've already allowed that by right. We are seeing some movement in looking at office buildings and converting those to housing. So the old Fifth Third building right downtown, that has been office since it was built in the 60s. City just approved for it to be converted to housing. We're going to be using a tax increment finance to help make that happen, because the reality is it's super expensive to go from an office building to an apartment building. So think about this. You and I work on the 6th floor of an office building, and there are 4 bathrooms down the hall that we can go and we all share, right? You don't necessarily have separate HVAC systems. You don't have kitchens in every single unit. So converting that 6th floor to 10 apartments, you have to build in individual bathrooms and kitchens and HVAC and water. So it's very expensive to do those conversions, which is why we were really supportive. Some state legislation changed about a year ago that allows us to use tax increment financing to incent office buildings to be converted over to housing. And this one downtown is going to be the first one.
Okay, that one's at 111 Lion.
111 Lion. Yep.
Cool.
Part of Vandenberg Center.
Great. Well, it looks like it is about time for us to take another break. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for coming in and providing some insight. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about housing right now, so it's always great to hear about folks who are constantly in that work, know what's going on. So as we head into another break, when we return, we'll be taking more questions from the community. Stay tuned.
It's morning in Grand Rapids. Do you know what's going on in your city? Stay informed about what's happening in your community with The Rapidian, your source for hyperlocal news and information. The Rapidian is a community-focused news source powered by local residents like you. Our volunteer writers and reporters create content that hits close to home about topics like local government, business, schools, events, and people. The Rapidian goes beyond the headlines to provide in-depth coverage of issues that affect Grand Rapids directly, so you can stay in the know. We aim to uplift the community by sharing positive, inspiring stories of growth, progress, and neighborhood pride. The Rapidian is your neighborhood newspaper for the digital age. Follow us on our website and social media to stay connected to your community. This is The Rapidian.
We're back. Here with us on City Commission is Mayor Bliss. Thank you so much for joining us again. We have some more questions from viewers, so let's get back into answering those. This first question comes from Travis. Travis says, it seems like we're getting more and large wind events like last week. Our neighborhood had 2 large trees fall on their houses. How does the city manage trees that may fall over? Also, is this considered as we try to plant more trees in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, that's a great question. So over the last several years, we've actually made, we've increased the size of our forestry department. And we also now have an emergency manager. I share your concern about high winds, more severe weather events, and we're starting to plan for that. For the forestry specifically, the city is responsible for taking care of trees in the right-of-way and then trees in public spaces, whether it's a park space or another public space. And that's where we focus our time and energy. So we do have we have our maintenance process, we call it asset management, where we go out and we monitor our trees, and we will actively do trimming. So we do it in quadrants around the city. So we do actively trim. As you know, so does DTE and consumers. Sometimes we don't always appreciate their severe trimming, but it's important. And then we also will proactively, like we ended up cutting down thousands of maple trees recently. They were at the end of their life, and we started removing those and then replacing them. And as we look at replacement, of course we want to continue to have a tree canopy. That will always be a priority for a whole host of reasons. Environmentally, across the board, we know it's socially, there's all these benefits. Our philosophy is we have to have the right tree in the right place. And so I think what you'll see, and some people don't always appreciate this, there are certain trees that we just won't plant anymore. They get too large, they're not as safe during severe weather events, and so we've made significant adjustments to the variety of trees that we place. You'll start to see smaller trees that don't grow as tall when they're fully mature, and our philosophy is the right tree in the right place. And so we're taking into account proximity to buildings, power lines, how much space there is in the ground for them to have the soil that they need to be successful and to thrive. And we have a wonderful forester. His name is Joe Sulak. And we have an urban forest committee that reviews our plans. And they're just fantastic. And so we're always looking at what we need to do.
If someone in the city finds a tree, maybe in a park, maybe it's on their street, and they think that it might be about to bite it.
Call 311.
Perfect.
Call 311. But we also encourage private property owners to maintain their trees. Mm-hmm. I was out after the storm, and a number of the trees, the significant trees that were either in the street or had fallen and hit cars or buildings, a number of those were on private property. So private property owners as well, I love that you have trees in your yard, but you want to make sure that you maintain those as well.
Great. We have another question. This one's coming from Daniel. Daniel says, so much responsibility for recycling falls on the citizens. What is the city doing to encourage businesses to produce less waste?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So a couple of things we've done at the city is that we do provide recycling bins for nonprofits and small businesses. So that was enacted probably about 6 or 7 years ago. But before that, our recycling program was only for residents, and we had limits also on rental properties. So we've tried to expand and encourage recycling that way. We've also looked at different types of waste from businesses. So with our biodigester, we looked at food waste, and we're now taking a lot of the food waste and byproducts from food manufacturers, and we're taking that to our biodigester, and we're creating renewable natural gas with that. So we're identifying what we can do to be a part of that, and then the county is doing a lot of education and work around educating businesses and providing more opportunities for them to recycle. And their ultimate goal, and it's ours as well, is how do you put less waste into the land, into landfills. So if you're interested in that, the county has a great website with lots of opportunities to learn. And then they're also doing more education around how do you safely recycle electronics, batteries, things that we really don't want to go in landfill, but people are often not sure how to recycle them. And that's for both businesses and residents.
This question was about businesses, but I have a few follow-ups about the residential side. We talked about last segment or earlier in this episode about this new technology. One question is, has the city ever considered incentives or penalties for residents who don't recycle or who don't recycle with care?
Yeah. So years ago, we had a GR Recycles program where we partnered with folks, and based on how often they recycled, they could get coupons to support local businesses. You can get 20% off or this. So we did that for a number of years in partnership with Local First. We didn't really see a huge impact from that incentive program. On the flip side, for enforcement, typically we'll give people a number of warnings, and then if they still have contaminated recycle bins, we actually remove them. So we we'll remove them, and they're not able to have them anymore.
I also saw on the news release that I saw on the city's website, go plug the city's website for city information, but that's where I found out about this program, and I read that for folks who might be flagged a few times by these AI cameras, the new techie trucks, they're going to get a postcard sent to their house. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep trying to educate people. And so that's part of the education, is that they'll be sent information, a postcard. We used to leave it on people's doors when we had people actually physically doing it. They'd write a note on there. They'd mark off what was in there that shouldn't have been. And so it'll be very similar.
Great. And it looks like we are out of questions from the community, which is no problem. I have questions up here I'd love to pick your brain about. But for people who are still watching, if you want to take part in this conversation, it's cityconnection@grcmc.org. Send in questions so that you have the opportunity to talk to the mayor directly, which you don't always get the chance. It's a very cool opportunity once a month. But I want to talk with you about the 100 and 100 program. Tell us a little bit about this. This is another housing initiative.
Yeah, and I wish I would have brought this up when Lindsay was here, because she's part of this initiative. So last week, myself, city, the county, a number of our nonprofit organizations, a number of the folks from our business community, as well as philanthropic community, came together with a goal of housing 100 individuals who've been chronically homeless in 100 days. So these are individuals that very often have been unhoused for over a year of their lives. So it's really about looking at our resources, looking at gaps, aligning those resources, having a good by name list. So that is where we have a list of individuals who've been chronically homeless. We know what their challenges are, what their struggles are, what supports they need in place, and then identifying an appropriate place for safe and stable housing. That means we need to add on some permanent supportive housing units. We're in the process of doing that. So Nexus Project is going to be opening up 40 permanent supportive housing units coming up by the end of August. So it's finding opportunities where people can go and then making sure that there's the wraparound supports to help them be successful in that housing to meet their needs. We know that individuals who've been chronically homeless, they tend to be individuals with fewer resources, even fewer social supports, but also they're individuals that tend to struggle more with PTSD, with mental health disorders, and substance use disorders. So, for years we've talked about how we have all of these great nonprofits in our community providing great work. A lot of people that go and need support, they're very successful in getting the support they need, but we continue to have, unfortunately and sadly and tragically, individuals in our community that fall through the cracks. And this initiative, 100 in 100, is really focused on those individuals and really putting all of our resources into finding appropriate opportunities for them to be housed. So we launched it last week. I'm hoping that before I'm mayor, 100 individuals who historically haven't been housed in our city will have a safe place to live.
Great, thank you for that. And we are almost out of time, but I want to take the opportunity, since you are being termed out and you have until the end of the year as mayor. We're in kind of a crazy election year with the presidential election. We just had our first debate, and we have a ton of local things going on as well. At the Rapidian, we're really focused on keeping folks engaged in local politics. And I was wondering if you had any insight or encouragement for people who are watching about why they shouldn't be too distracted by national politics, but should still stay engaged with local politics during this time.
That's a great question. So I'm super biased. I love local politics.
Me too.
I love being nonpartisan. I love working on local issues. I love being able to see the impact of my work, the impact of our community coming together. The work being done at the county level and state level and federal level, it's really important too. So I say be engaged at every level, at least informed. But at the local level, on the city commission, there's 7 of us, and you need 7 good people who are community-minded, who are able to listen, to understand the issue, do their homework, and then make a decision based on what they believe is in the best interest for our community. You don't always get it right, but you've got to have good people around that table in order to move our city forward. So it really, really matters. It's not like the 100 people who are, in the House or in Congress, hundreds of people in Congress. Right here, the people you elect to serve locally, they have a direct impact. And that goes for the school board too. Lots of core issues are going on around school board tables every single week. People need to be engaged. They need to elect good people, and they need to stay aware of what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. I would say I get a breath of fresh air from that nonpartisan, non-divisive, policy-focused politics, elections. Yeah. So stay informed. But we are at all of the time that we have today. So thank you so much for your insight and for our guest for coming in and providing us with local information. And thank you to all of you at home for tuning in and sending in your questions. Don't forget, you can always watch rebroadcasts of this program throughout the month of July on cable GRTV's Channel 25 or the GRTV YouTube page. See you next month, Grand Rapids.
The Grand Rapids Community Media Center is committed to creating a diverse and inclusive environment for all community members. It is a place where community voices are heard, valued, and lifted through media. We seek to provide area residents with a platform to participate in free speech, be engaged with the community, and share their diverse voices. As a multimedia platform organization, we provide and support a variety of community resources, including our radio station, WYCE 88.1 FM, our TV station, GRTV, our hyper-local news program, The Rapidian, web services, and our historic theater, Wealthy Theater.
WYCE is West Michigan's only community radio station that is listener-supported and volunteer-powered. WYCE uses local voices to help listeners discover and celebrate different services, cultures, and events. What I really like about programming music in WYCE is I get to not only interact with listeners and local musicians, but I get to put together a musical collage every week and give it away to the universe. As a volunteer programmer, you get the training on how to use equipment, how to access music from the library, and how to put together a great show that showcases local and national artists and still has your creativity included.
The Web Services Department helps West Michigan nonprofits connect, learn, create, and share through locally built and accessible websites. We help nonprofits strengthen their online presence by developing one-of-a-kind websites tailored to their specific needs. The Web Services team can take care of all the technical needs of getting a new site up and running, including website hosting, domain name registration, theme development, and page layout. Websites are built with accessibility and responsiveness in mind, making sure our projects are available on any screen and accessible to people of all abilities. We are passionate about helping organizations in the nonprofit sector effectively communicate their stories online, promoting equity and media access with our affordable services.
Wealthy Theater is a historic theater on the southeast side of Grand Rapids. It was built in 1911, and today it stands as a performing arts center, historic cinema, and community venue. We provide a space for community connection, where community members can get together, enjoy different shows and different events, from concerts to comedy, musicals, theater, film screenings, you name it. Anybody from the community can sign up to be a member and rent one of our spaces to host their event. We have a staff here at the theater that helps make all the events here happen, as well as a great community of volunteers. The goal is to bring the community together, bring audiences together, artists together, create experiences where those two can connect. Whether you're an audience member who wants to come see a show, or you're somebody who wants to put on a show, Wealthy Theater is a space for you.
The Rapidian is a hyper-local news source powered by, for, and of the people of Grand Rapids, Michigan. We launched in 2009 using funds from local organizations and generous donors, and this community-driven platform empowers residents to share their stories, post articles, and keep track of local events and issues. By emphasizing citizen journalism, the Rapidian provides a unique grassroots perspective and a vital news service for the residents of Grand Rapids. In 2023, we are relaunching the Rapidian with the Grand Rapids Documenters program, where we train and pay local citizens to cover public meetings, empowering residents with the tools and resources to strengthen the news media landscape in Grand Rapids and become more civically engaged.
GRTV airs public access television programming made by and for the Grand Rapids community, amplifying their voices to support a diverse and vibrant democracy. We provide the tools, training, and broadcast platform for free speech. Community members can take classes on video and production features, borrow professional equipment, editing software, and use of our studio facilities to create their own content. We help community members connect, learn, create, and share.